Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and those who report on them, with artists, scientists, educators, social scientists, government officials, yes, politicians. All will be one to one. Today, we're talking about the future of those who are either at risk of incarceration or who don't know where to go after they get out of prison. I'm delighted to welcome JoAnne Page, President and CEO of the Fortune Society, which addresses these concerns with compassion and supports the disenfranchised by providing an extraordinary array of services. Later in the program, we'll meet Vilma Donovan, recently out of prison and a new member of the Fortune Society family. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Tell us how the Fortune Society got started.
Well, it's an interesting story because we did not start as the result of a blue ribbon commission. We started as the result of a play. In effect, we're a social movement that grew out of the theater. David Rothenberg was producing a play called In Fortune in Men's Eyes, which was a play written by a Canadian playwright about his own experience in prison. As part of the play, there was a talkback section where the members of the audience could ask questions. And on one occasion, a woman challenged what she saw, challenged the brutality that she saw, and said it can't really be like that. And a man in the audience stood up and said, well, let me tell you about what my time in prison was like. That became part of the play. He brought his friends, there were ongoing discussions, and the David Susskind show picked it up. The morning after that show, David Rothenberg went to his office, and there was a line of men and women just out of prison looking for help. That's how we started. And we're now 40 years old. That was in 1967. We've evolved over the years, and our services have evolved in just that way. We started with public speaking on criminal justice issues, with counseling. A woman named Melanie Johnston came to us as a volunteer and was stuffing envelopes and realized that one of the men she was stuffing envelopes with couldn't read very well. So she started tutoring him. And he asked for more help for his friends. And when she got overwhelmed, she brought friends, and our education program started. So we've evolved our services based on the needs of the men and women walking in our doors. And at this point, we have almost 200 staff. We have a really intensive array of services. And we serve about 3,500 men and women just out of prison.
And you operate out of this edifice called the Castle up on 140th Street and Riverside Drive. How does one get to the Castle? How long do they stay there? Is it co-ed? How does it work?
Well, the Castle is actually our most intensive program. We also have about 50,000 square feet of service space in the Chelsea area and a service in Queens Plaza. The Castle is our residence, and we've opened it 5 years ago. We house about 60 men and women there, men and women, but in the same way that the prison population is largely male, most of our residents are male. So I think we have 3 women in the house right now with 60 residents. The challenge is that the need for it is so enormous that in a way it's as much luck as anything else, because the number of people who are eligible for it is beyond our ability to handle. So we really struggle because we have to say no to people to whom it can make a life-changing difference. The eligibility criteria were deliberately drawn very broad, because the reason we created it was that we were seeing people come to us who needed housing, but who were excluded from the other options available because they had violent convictions, because they didn't have a period of drug-free time, because they didn't meet the eligibility criteria. So we decided what we were going to do, in the way that we do at Fortune anyway, is look at who the people were now, not who they were in the past, because we think a person is more than their past. We would look at how hungry people were for a better life, and we would look at their interest and willingness to live in a community that's clean and sober, that is absolutely violence-free. The one thing you'll get thrown out for is violence or threat of violence, and that is built of people who are trying to rebuild their lives and support each other in it. So we drown in applicants, and we really struggle with how we handle not having enough space. We are going to be building in the empty lot behind us and doing a mixed-use building. This is West Harlem, where they're losing their affordable housing in a huge way. We're going to be building a mixed-use building that is service space, 50 supportive housing studios for our clients, and 63 apartments for low-income people in the community, plus a supers building, a supers apartment. So when people come into the castle, we start by welcoming them, we start by feeding them, we tell them welcome home. We've had people come after days at jail, coming out homeless. We've had people come after 30 years in prison, coming out homeless. So the range is tremendous. And the range in age has been from 18 to late 70s. So similar range. And what we do is wrap our services around them, work with them to help them build the lives they imagined while they were in that cell thinking about how they wish their lives had been different. We help them build the clean and sober time that they need to have a future. We ask everybody in the house to be part of our community, do community service to help keep the house working, and to be engaged either in full-time work, full-time training, school, therapy, some combination, but the equivalent of a full-time job. And then we work with them at rebuilding their lives.
Years ago, I interviewed a man who was about 44 years old, and he told me that he was recently out of prison. I think he was in a halfway house. He had spent 24 years of his life in prison, in and out, in and out, in and out. And he told me, that was the last time, I'm not going back again. And I recall being skeptical because, as you know, the recidivism rate is extremely high.
It's about 2 out of 3.
In your experience, what makes a difference between a person's going back again and a person's being able to stay out?
You know, I ask myself that question all the time because I used to try to figure out who would make it and who wouldn't. And I was wrong so much of the time that maybe that's a God's eye view. I think our job is to give everybody everything we can. I think the major difference is hope. And I'm saying that because I've seen people come out who have all of the things you think they need lined up, and they don't make it through. I've seen people who have obstacles that are so devastating you can't imagine how they get up in the morning, much less keep moving forward. I think that if you have the hope that your life can be better, if you really push at it, that gives you what it takes to make it through the hard times. And what we try to do is build in the role modeling and the supports that keep people hopeful. When people come to us initially, they're bursting with it. But then they hit the world, and they hit the barriers, they hit the discrimination, they hit the internal and the external challenges. And if we surround people with the supports they need, with people who were where they were, sometimes maybe in worse trouble, who've made it through, and with the coaching in the community, it increases people's odds enormously.
You talk about hitting the barriers. Yeah. In your experience, what are the biggest obstacles for ex-offenders who are trying to make it?
There are so many, and some of them are informal, some of them are formal. Some of them are legal barriers or barriers in policy. If you have somebody who comes out of jail or prison, does not pose a risk to the community, has a family living in public housing, they can't go home. If you have a kid who gets swept up in a drug sweep, who lives with mom in public housing, he not only ends up in court, but he ends up homeless as well, because his family is faced with either losing their home or cutting loose their child. So there are policies that are brutal in their impact. There's tremendous job discrimination. And what you have is many factors altogether. Race matters. If you look at who gets arrested for drug law violations, it's overwhelmingly people of color, and we know that drug use is evenly spread across the population. So people come out with a felony conviction, come out of prison with a felony conviction. They come out to legal discrimination and to discrimination in practice. They come out to communities that are devastated by the number of people released from prison coming home again. Just a handful of communities supply most of the people to the prison systems. And they are the same communities with schools that are failing. They're the same communities with systems that don't support people. They're the ones with the low birth weight children.
So if you can make one public policy change that would help affect the lives of your clients, what would it be?
It would be putting an end to the discrimination, what we call the collateral consequences. It would be 2. Let me get 2. Okay? One would be to change our sentencing laws. It is a crime to have an entire generation of young people of color with addiction problems run through the criminal justice system, when the white kids with addiction problems that I grew up with never touched the criminal justice system. It is a crime to put that albatross around people's lives for the rest of their lives. I would change the sentencing laws, change the drug sentencing laws, because the war on drugs has driven the explosion of the prison population.
Right.
It's unconscionable. The second thing I would do is get rid of the collateral consequences that come with incarceration. If you've served the time, you should not then be kept from voting when you get out, be kept from living in housing when you get out, be kept from getting jobs when you get out. If the barrier is related to the crime and related to public safety, that's a different story. What we have is broad, widespread discrimination based on having served time. And it cripples people for the rest of their lives. It's unconscionable.
You got in a big controversy when you allowed Joel Steinberg to come and live there when he got out. You know, he had murdered his young daughter back in 1987. Why did you allow him to come, and what happened that he left fairly quickly, I gather?
Yeah. We have a value as an organization, which is that if somebody needs our help, we give it unless they pose a risk to the other people in our services. He needed a place to live. Parole actually called us asking a special favor because nobody else would take them. And I looked at the things we normally look at. Did he pose a risk to us or to the community we lived in? No. Was he asking to come in? Yes. Were we needed? Yes. Were we the place of last resort? Yes. And then I said to parole, I have to check with my board because there's going to be a thunderstorm around this one. And we have our normal policies, but they need to know there'll be problems. So for me, it was an issue of values. And what we see, and I'm seeing it especially around sex offenders, Joel committed a terrible crime, and he served, I believe, 17 years. And there is a point when the punishment should end and people should be able to rebuild their lives and be held accountable for being good citizens. But you got to have a place to live in order to do that.
Right.
Okay? And what we should not do is take the people we're most scared of and keep them from getting services. We should be putting the people we're most scared of into our most intensive services. What we're doing right now with sex offenders, for example, is we are creating so few options for them that we're increasing risk rather than making communities safer. And we're tarring everybody with the same brush. We're saying that the kid who has a relationship with a girl a couple of years younger, statutory rape, who poses no risk to anybody, is the same as a serial pedophile.
Right.
And we put the same albatross around their necks. So when we got the call for Joel, I saw it as something we needed to do. It was a values issue. But I also saw it as a chance to do advocacy and a chance to work the culture at Fortune. And we had a lot of controversy internally about taking him in. And we had arguments around the water cooler about our core value, which is anybody who gets our help, who doesn't pose a risk, gets that help.
And in the end, you decided he fit that criteria.
He fit the criteria. We took him in. It meant that the board and the agency needed to really look at our values, and we got pushed up against them, which is a really healthy thing. And then he broke one of our rules. The rule was, for him specially, you cannot go out and seek media attention, because we had helicopters overhead. We had our folks being harassed on the way back and in and out of the building, and we were willing to endure that to give him the same shot everybody we think deserves. We were not willing to endure it when he created it in addition.
Okay. JoAnne,
but we continued providing him with services afterward.
We're going to have to take a break. When we return, JoAnne Page and I will be joined by Vilma Donovan.
Hi, I'm Tony Bennett. They say the situation in Darfur is deteriorating. Let me translate. People are dying. We must do more than watch the news. I'd like you to go to unrefugees.org. Join our campaign to aid Darfur. Thank you.
Welcome back to One to One. Joining JoAnne Page, President and CEO of the Fortune Society, is Vilma Donovan, who was released from prison in June. Vilma, was your second stint in prison.
Yes, ma'am.
And the second time you came out directly to the Fortune Society. What's the difference between that first time and the second time?
Well, the first time I was released, I went back home to Long Island, and I wanted to do so much, but in Long Island there wasn't any places for me to get the help that I needed, like what Fortune offers. I spiraled downward fast, and when I came out this time, I was able to find Fortune and go into Fortune and be able to do what I needed to do to help myself. Fortune is, they offer so much. I've taken a career development class where I learned how to do interviews. They teach us how to answer felony questions. We do mock interviews, you know, how to answer certain questions. Financial classes. I took computer classes. I do group 2 nights a week, one-on-one counseling. All these things that I need to better myself, Fortune offers. That's the difference this time.
And how has being there changed you? Has it changed you in the 2.5 months you've been there?
Oh, it's changed me tremendously. I have so much more self-esteem, confidence. I'm very proud today. It's just incredible, an incredible feeling that I have.
I have heard this, and both of you can respond to this, that women who are in prison don't get the kind of support from outside that men do. You know, always, you know, reading stories about, you know, girlfriends and wives and mothers taking the long trip, you know, upstate to visit men in prison, but, you know, almost nobody visiting the women.
Yeah.
Is that true? And does that continue, that lack of support continue once you get out?
I think, you know, when I was in prison, I was one of the fortunate ones. I did have support, people come to see me, but a lot of the girls didn't have that. And there's really not a lot of avenues that we can take to get the support and the help that we need. Because for some reason, women in prison, it's different, you know, with the children and losing your children to the system and going through just all of that and losing your families. Because a lot of times, women in prison, it's more than one time we've been there.
How about that, JoAnne?
Yeah, I think that's true. What men sometimes are able to do is come back to a family. But often the woman is what holds the family together, and if she's locked up, there's nothing left. And so there's a kind of an echo impact on her children. Mm-hmm. And for a while, when I was a law student, I used to drive a van from New York City, taking people up to visit their loved ones in prison. And it was overwhelmingly the mothers and the girlfriends of the people doing time. For the women, it was their mothers, mostly. Mm-hmm. So there's a terrible breakup that's happened with families, and mass incarceration is a real part of it. So many men are just locked up.
Right, right. In the last decade or so, I know a lot of the kinds of support service that you used to have in prisons no longer get funded. I know in particular college programs where you get your college degree. I gather those have pretty much vanished. And other support services, are they no longer there? And what impact does their absence have on the inmate population?
Well, the prison where I was incarcerated at was basically a work camp. We were on cruise. We'd go out and do work in the community. The only services that they offered was if you didn't have your GED, you can go to school. But basically that was it. There was no like computer class. There was nothing really to college of any sort to get into.
Yeah, what we've seen is 2 patterns. One is that more and more people are locked up, and the other is that less and less in the way of resources to help them build constructive lives is available. And the most devastating loss in my mind was college in prison. Mm-hmm. We have so many people at Fortune who were in prison when there was college, who used it to turn their lives around. Our chief operating officer went to college in prison and learned what he was capable of. But the younger people coming in don't have that.
Who cut that off? Was it federal loans that were cut off? Was it state programs that were cut off? Or was
it happened on the federal and the state level. Mm-hmm. What happened politically was that as the country got more conservative, what people were saying is, why should we fund bad people to go to college when we don't fund our kids? But the truth of it is that it cost about $1,800 a year per prisoner getting a college education under Pell Grants. And it costs something like $30,000 a year to lock somebody up. And the single biggest impact in reducing recidivism was created by the college programs. So the question I ask is, if you're willing to spend $30,000 to put a person in a cage, why would you not spend $1,800 to prevent crime? It makes no sense whatsoever. We're fighting hard to get college put back in, and we're seeing real support for it, because nothing has been proven to do better at reducing recidivism.
Right. More and more, we're seeing more and more female ex-offenders and more young women who are at risk. Do you deal with them differently?
Women have the same needs that men have, and they have additional needs. I think that women come out with much more in the way of barriers and much more in the way of stigma. There's a way in which I think the stigma for a woman of being incarcerated runs a lot deeper, that men are given more room to get into trouble. But what's driving the number of women locked up is the war on drugs. And what we've done is we've put barriers in place. New York has opted out of some of them, but in many states, women who have drug convictions can't get food stamps. So as they try to rebuild their lives to pull their children out of foster care, how do they eat? So the barriers are enormous.
Vilma, what are your goals now?
Well, right now I'm currently looking for employment. My plans are in January. I started the process. I want to go back to college to get my associate's degree in secretarial science, so I have that in the works right now, and to live a productive life.
Say something about what you've accomplished, because you've done more in 2.5 months than most people do in that number of years.
Like I said, the financial class, the career development class. We just recently had our first annual family day, and I was on the committee. I was in charge of the kids doing the goodie bags. I made 60 of them. And we were able to bring our families into our home, because it is my home, and have them see how we're living and what Fortune is all about. It was my mom's birthday, and I called my mom to wish her happy birthday, and she said, you know, Saturday, you gave me the best present I could ever ask for. You brought me to your house, and I got to see how you were living. That alone was such a proud moment for me that, you know, I can't even say enough of it, you know
You're
what I
doing
mean?
what you need to do, and you're seeing
doing
the results.
everything, yeah. You know, I go to group, like I said, groups. You know, I take an affiliation group. I have the one-on-one counseling. We're getting ready for Halloween. I'm just giving back so much, because so much is given to me.
We do a haunted castle.
Yes.
And we've gone from going into a neighborhood where people were scared about what we were going to be creating to a place where, as one of our staff says, people trust us enough to let us scare their kids. And we take the castle, because our building looks like a castle, and our people dress up with blood coming down their faces and disembodied heads and screams and things crawling on the walls, and we terrify the neighborhood children.
Oh, and this becomes like a haunted house kind of
haunted
thing.
house, yeah. And we feed them sugar and we turn them loose on the neighborhood, so we are truly a menace.
That's probably the scarier part. It's probably a lot scarier. For both of you, who inspires you? Or who has inspired you?
Right now, the people I live with, staff. I want to, you know, I'm living in a place with staff who have been through the same thing I've been through, and looking at them and seeing their accomplishments. I want to be, that's where I want to be in my life today.
And for me, I think it's my clients. It's the clients at Fortune who really inspire me, because when you see people working on rebuilding their lives and having the courage to deal with the demons that they've been fighting and to build from scratch as adults, it takes so much guts to rebuild your life in the face of the kind of obstacles we see, that it makes me think, and how am I dealing with my own issues? We do a community meeting on Thursday nights at the castle, and I find it so moving, because you see people growing right in front of your eyes. And that really is what fires me up and keeps me going.
So if you want to say something to the people out there who are listening, people who have not been in the system, and perhaps people who have been in the system, what do you most want to say to them?
Well, for the women who are incarcerated, and men, you know, try to get in contact with Fortune. It offers so much. And just for, in general, the people to come down and see how we're living, where we're living, and what we're about, because it's a great place.
And for me, there's a line from the Talmud that goes, to save one life is like saving a universe. You do not throw away a human being. People may have done something wrong. They pay for it. they should be welcomed back into the community and given a road to be people who matter in the lives of their families and their community. They should be given the right to hold a job and support their kids and be people who are responsible citizens.
Has the profile, and we're almost out of time, so I'll get this in quickly, has the profile of people who've been coming to the Portrait Society changed much over the years?
We are seeing more people with mental illness as our mental health system has shut down. We're seeing more homeless people. We're seeing more people with fewer options as unskilled jobs vanish. So our people are the people who really are struggling with the economic conditions that the larger society is.
I'm sorry, but we're out of time. My thanks to JoAnne Page and Vilma Donovan for joining me. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.